going to do a quick tutorial on some texture stamps. I'll show you how I made my little texture stamp for my parrot feet that I did. So on the parrot feet, I made the texture stamps out of cosplay. And one nice thing about making stamps out of cosplay is when they're done baking, they can still bend. So it makes it so you can wrap it around the clay a little bit when you're pressing texture in. Just conditioning in a little bit of clay here. Okay, I'm just going to squish this out flat, not too thin, or else your texture won't really work that well. Make sure to smooth out any of the fingerprints on there. Now, tools don't have to be expensive. Toothpicks are really handy tools. So I'm going to take one of these guys, and on one end, I'm just going to break off the tip. Wow, having issues there. Thought I was strong enough to break a flimsy toothpick. Okay, now I'm going to take that, it's a little jagged on the tip, so I'm just going to push it down on my work surface and flatten it a little bit. Alright, now you can see it's no longer jagged. So we've got a really fine pointy end and a smaller or a larger flat end. So I'm going to take this and just start pressing into the clay. It doesn't have to be anything magical, anything difficult really. Texture stamps are super easy and can be a lot of fun. I try and press them in to where they're not excuse me, right on top of each other. You can see there's a little tiny bit of space around each one. And then if you want, you can play around with the finer end of the toothpick to do some really small excuse me, small dots texture. So for the bottom of the bird's foot, let me grab it really quick. For the bottom of the bird's foot, which you can't really see so well on the video, it's got a lot of really fine, small dots of texture. And so the texture stamp I made for the bottom of the foot was using a finer tip. And then, so it wasn't quite as fine as this toothpick, but the finer indents, so you can make finer textures on the bottom. On the top of the foot, it would have been this wider edge is just about the same as the texture I did for this. So after this was baked, you could just press this onto raw clay as you're sculpting to get all that raised texture here. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish texturing this one, and then I'll show you how I do a slightly different shape of a stamp. probably not a good video for people with, I think it's pronounced tryptophobia, that fear of holes or whatever. Okay. So another texture stamp I really like to use, which can be a little easier to hold and work with than the flat one, is I make kind of an ice cream cone shape. So I'll roll this to where it's pointier on one end, and that'll be a little handle. So we're not going to do anything on this side. On this side I'm going to flatten it out a little bit. Okay, that's pretty good. So this, I'll just do a similar, pretty much the same texture I did on the other one. This is a good texture if you want to make something like bird's feet that are scaly, or reptiles or fish, anything that's got scales on it. And a good idea is to look at images of scales and see how they kind of overlap each other a little bit. They're not one right on top of each other in a straight column. Generally, it's like one scale goes between the two scales above it. Okay, so what's nice about this stamp, you've got a handle to work with, and you can do kind of a rocking motion when you're stamping on things. And I found this to be really good for all kinds of things, for larger creatures. If I'm doing texture on a face or feet or something, I can roll this over the texture of the clay. And so that's how I do my little texture stamps. It's fun to just sit down and try a bunch of different textures. You could take some clay, maybe you want to do some fur texture or something like that. And you could just take a toothpick and just draw on the clay with the toothpick. Make it look kind of like fur. And then once this little texture stamp is baked and you press it into your clay, it should be, instead of having the texture dented in like the stamp has, the texture will stand out on the sculpture. I'd love to see any texture stamps anyone else makes. If you want to send them to me and on Patreon, if you follow me on Patreon, or even just to my Facebook page. It'd be fun to see what you come up with. Thanks for watching.